Hey, everybody, I'm Pete Blowers with Corrections Unfiltered, the podcast where corrections meets conversation. I'm lucky today. I'm with a person that was a warden of mine and a great mentor to me when I was working in a federal agency. And he has a career that spans 50 years in corrections. And there's no sense in me even trying to navigate the way through that. So, what I'd like to do, Randy Davis, we want to go ahead and give a little bit of a brief history of what your background was.
Well, if you've been as long as I have, Pete, 50 years, this can't be too brief. I started off actually as a probation officer, which has been 50 years ago. I thought about that this morning. Then I went to work for the Bureau of Prisons when I was 21 years old. I was there as a correction officer, then later became a paralegal specialist. Shortly thereafter, I was a case manager. Then I was a camp administrator, executive assistant to the warden. Then I transferred my first time as an assistant warden down to Maxwell Air Force Base in Montgomery, Alabama. And from that point, I was there a couple of years and then went to Big Spring, Texas as an AW. There a couple of years and went back to Marion as an AW. Then I was promoted to warden. Was a warden at several different places, Yankton, South Dakota, Memphis, Tennessee. Then I was assistant deputy director in Kansas City. And then I retired my federal career in Marion back as the warden. Of course, from there, I thought I was done, thought I retired, and ended up going to work for the state of Illinois. Worked at the state of Illinois for about 5.5, 6 years. Was a warden at 2 of their facilities, and then I was their assistant director for the South for probably a year and a half. Then I thought I was retired again, and as things happen, I went to work for a private company for about a year and a half, where we housed ICE and Marshall prisoners. And then I thought I was retired again, and for somehow I ended up going to work for another private company and worked as a consultant for them for about 3.5 years, and occasionally I still do once in a while.
So let me ask you, I mean, to have such a long story and a long career in that, and from going from agency to private, what kept you doing that? What kept you staying inside the game?
I always enjoyed the staff, and actually I didn't really mind the inmates for the most part. That always kept you on your toes. Not all inmates, of course, obviously are bad. So some inmates were, really, I didn't mind talking to them and having conversations and feeling like maybe I was promoting them to do better at the facility. Now, of course, some facilities it was easier to do than others. Your Super Maxes, of course, it was hard to get them motivated, but some of the lower level institutions I saw improvements. So I think that was a lot of it. Of course, money. I liked the job. It's a good career. I think it was a good career for me. Would I do it again? Probably would.
I was curious. There was a conversation somebody was having, and they were talking about how when you have an agency that has like an age limit, you have to retire at a specific age. A lot of times that age is they're just hitting their peak, they're hitting their stride. All the years of experience have gathered in, all the leadership's gathered in, all the things that they're finally hitting that peak, and then the age hits, and then they have to do something else. Did you find it a benefit to be able to take all of the experience you had from your first agency, moving it forward to Illinois and moving it forward into the private companies like you did?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was a lot more knowledge about policy procedures, and a lot more real knowledge from incidents that you were in. Whether it been attempted escapes, assaults, and all those kind of things. The more you're around that kind of stuff, the more you know. The more you know what works and what doesn't work. Had it, I would have stayed with the bureau longer. In the right situation. I mean, you figure I went ahead and worked another over 20 years since I retired from there. That's 20 years I could have worked with the bureau, but they don't make it financially a good thing because they lower your retirement benefits, as you get, past, you get to that age limit. And of course, then there's that, requirement, unless you get a waiver, that you retire with, 50
Yeah.
years old.
Yeah, I noticed when I went into the privates, I had the opportunity to work with people who were in an agency, for a good number of years, and then I'm learning from them, and it was doing the same, it was getting the same result, but maybe going about it just a little bit different. And to me, that was really invigorating because and this is just my perspective of it. When I
Right.
was in the one agency, whether I was at a low, a medium, a high, or a super max, I was still operating off the same policy, the same mindset. Although the custody level and behaviors of the inmates may have you implement those differently, it was the same policies.
Right.
But then when I was exposed to state agencies and federal contracts outside of the BOP, it was really neat. It was invigorating for me. And then couple that with I'm learning from people who had one of my wardens that I was assistant warden for was a 10-time warden in the state. The other guy was a 14-time warden in the state. You don't run into those
Right.
too often. And so I'm sitting there just absorbing all this in. And I like to think that was what motivated me to say, hey, I want a bigger bite at the apple. And that's when I,
Right.
applied for, and luckily I was selected for warden.
Yeah, I think of course, every agency's got similar. I mean, the main policies are the same, but there are things they do them differently. I could say, well, I'll give you for instance, in Illinois, the way they moved inmates, I had never seen it, how they did it. It was so structured, and it would have been. I would have liked to have used that more in the bureau when I was there, but I honestly had no idea that you could get them to do that, and
Yeah.
it worked well. It kept us from having problems, and the meals went quicker. They would have them line up to go to meals. They'd go outside the units and line up, and I look back on that and think, well, that is a neat. Does it really work? And it does. They've been doing it
Yeah.
for years.
One of the first contracts I was exposed to, or agency that I was so exposed to after the bureau, was the state agency. And honestly, there's a lot of great qualities that the BOP had for running a SEG unit. They had a little bit of a twist on how they did their SEG reviews and things that I
Mhm.
just thought, I'm like, man, why didn't we think about this? Not that the BOP was wrong. It's just these guys had a special little way of doing their SEG reviews that really was impactful and included everybody. Everybody who was a decision maker in that inmate, from the officer, the counselor, the mental health, everybody was in the room. And there's other agencies that use that, but it was just really intriguing to me to see how that whole meeting with the detainee or inmate went. So I really enjoyed that experience that I had with the private cell. There was stressful days, but there was never a bad day with it.
Right. Right.
So you and I met up. Gosh, I forget the year, but it was early 2000s when you came to Marion as the warden.
Yes. Yeah. Probably 2003.
Yeah.
Thinking.
And what was intriguing to me was I had already been there for 3 years. But meeting you, there was so many things that you had just, it was like I had a chance to like to open an encyclopedia and find out more about Marion. Marion was a facility that, lived off a lot of history because they had 3 homicides of staff there. They had the 1967, or it was 1969 when Verm Jarvis was murdered.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you had in October 22nd of 1983, when 2 officers were killed in the same day, Clutts and Mr. Hoffman.
Right.
And when that happens at a facility, it's like the echoes stay for a long period of time. But in the conversations that you and I had, you were telling me about the earlier years when you were there. And so I've been doing a little bit of reading, which is scary because my comprehension levels aren't always that high. But and I'm no way trying to play lawyer here. I'm just talking
Right.
about my experience and stuff. There was a time frame that you were extremely involved in about the challenges to the Super Max model that came out of those homicides in '83. So
Yeah.
really, if you don't mind, I'd really like to kind of dice that up a little bit and find out more about what was going on, what was the challenges that were going on, what was the defense that the DOJ was making, and what was your role in all that.
Well, when you look back, of course, in October of 1983, that's when the two officers, Gene Clutts and Robert Hoffman, were killed. Um, we had had serious incidents prior to that. A lot of people base it on those two incidents, but really there was a kind of a history there. We'd had another officer who had been stabbed like 17 times. We had a major assault in the hallway where a whole bunch of staff were assaulted and beat up, basically. Then we had all these murders, inmate murders, in the hallways, in the corridors, and I'm talking about uh, just some of the worst kind of murders that you can even imagine. Uh, and I look back and I think, gosh, how did I survive, even continue working there? Because a lot of people didn't. A lot of people quit during that period of time. They said, this is not for me, or I'm not coming back after this. It's just too dangerous. And, I don't know why I didn't make that decision. I think mainly because at that point I had become a paralegal specialist, was working in legal. At that time, the prison did not have an attorney. You just had a paralegal who responded to all the lawsuits, and we got tons and tons and tons of lawsuits. I mean, it's a typical prison, and we used to respond to all the grievances, and we get 1,400 grievances a year. It was just unbelievable. But that was all part of kind of graduating into the incident, which really the final incident was the murders. That's when they decided, we've got to do something. So they basically did an initial lockdown, which would, like you would any other institution. But then the plan became, we're not going to ever open it back up like a regular institution anymore, because it puts too many people at harm, both inmates and staff. And that's why they went into this. Initially, it was a 23-hour lockdown. Inmates got out once a day for recreation and then a shower. Because that gradually they got more lenient with that as time went on, as made changes. They made a lot of adjustments to the actual construction of the facility. Made it more secure to let them out, and made them where they could let them out in small groups. We had to go to the court. Of course, they filed the lawsuits, class action lawsuits, and some individual lawsuits in addition that was very similar. But they took most of those and handled those in the class action. And you had to paint the picture. You had to explain to the courts what really happened. So I know I put together at that time, based on all the incidents that happened, we went to the special investigator's office and pulled all the different incidents that we'd had for I think we went back about a 2-year period. Maybe it might have been a year period, but there was well over 200 or 300 major incidents with assaults and stabbings, and not just staff, but with inmates also, that kind of painted the picture why we were going to what we were going to. Because, what kind of led up to that, Marion was the facility that they always sent the worst of the worst, inmates who could not make it in regular GP populations that they felt like needed more security. They sent their gang members, the guys who were would probably escape if they had an opportunity, and they sent people here that just could not be managed in a more open style, bigger facility. So that's how they sent them to Marion. So when you send the melting pot to one place, you're going to have issues, and that's basically what happened. They sent them there, and they were out of control. They had the power, and we had to take the power back by implementing control.
Yeah, I was reading about the fact that the bureau was taking the people who were the most violent, the least likely to follow any kind of a rule whatsoever, even amongst their fellow inmates.
Right.
So some of the inmates there had killed other inmates or been involved in serious assaults, not just I got into a little fist fight, but some serious assaults and things. But Marion was also housing many inmates from other states that were the same. So you got
Correct.
this melting pot thing happening, like you talked about, where now you're taking one agency's worth of the worst, then other agencies' worst of the worst, and dropping them, in Southern Illinois.
Right. I don't remember the exact number, but I'll throw this out, and if I'm proved wrong, I'm wrong. But I think at that time, 80% of the inmates had either been in a assault or been involved in some kind of assault or murder. Now, I'm not talking just a minor assault. We're talking about serious assaults or murders, of course, attempted murders. But so that was kind of what we were dealing with.
So now you're the paralegal, no attorney. And now I imagine there's other out like the central offices involved, and there's people who are involved, but you're pretty much the boots on the ground guy who's
Right.
getting things put together. How was that? Can you kind of walk us down how that all went for you? Because that's not
Well,
an easy thing to do as a paralegal.
well, they eventually sent an attorney in to help. That was near closer to us going to court time. But initially, it was myself. Then they sent us another paralegal in to help me. We had to basically start putting together all the documentation and the paperwork for the U.S. Attorney's Office. We worked very closely with the U.S. Attorney's Office. We had a courtroom right at the institution. She would at that time it was a female U.S. attorney that handled that, and she was outstanding. And she would come to the institution, and we would go over the cases a lot of times on the phone, and she'd say, this is what I need, and this is what I need. Might need affidavits, might need discovery, might need, that kind of stuff. And we would put that together. But I spent, 12, 14-hour days for long as I can remember till that case actually went to court.
How did that go? How'd that go as far as presenting it and everything? Because it's quite a challenge you're up against.
Yes. We testifying in court, having staff testify. We actually had inmates even testify about how dangerous it was. I know I testified on all the incidents that you talked about. Since I prepared the document, I'm the one who had to testify regarding where it came from, the information came from.
Wow, that is a big burden to carry, and that had to be. I mean, how old were you?
Golly, I'm so old
My
now.
math puts you about
I'm so
24,
old now. I
25.
can't remember. Well, 83. So, gosh, I was probably 40, wasn't I? Close to that.
Oh, that's right, because you ran around the country.
No, I was 30. I was in my 30s.
Yeah, you were young because you started at 21.
Right. About that same. And my
bad.
wife was killed actually in a car wreck just shortly after that. Which, I mean, not that has anything to do with here, but it was right all during that same time frame. Because the incident happened in '83. We probably didn't get into court, I don't think, till 80. I don't know, 84, 85 before it actually went to trial.
From what I read, I think the decisions were made in '85.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm curious because, when I get there in 2000, a lot of the staff that I was working with there was a couple that were there.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But they were all the recipients of the people who passed the baton off to them.
Right.
And there was a lot of pride in them to make sure that October 22nd never happened again. Right. October 22nd, 1983, never happened again. And me showing up as I had just been a shift supervisor. I was an officer and a senior officer at a medium level, high speed, but not much of a decision maker. People were telling me what to do. I get to a low level facility where I earned my way as an assistant shift to shift supervisor. Not a lot of things happen. I mean, I remember my first shift there and I was like, wow, this is going to be something different. Because it was pretty, they saw me as fresh meat. Let's see what we can do with this guy.
Right.
But I had those people there that had been there for a period of time that the baton was passed to, kind of breaking me in and telling me this is what you need to do to get used to this place. Right. And these are the standards that we live by. So going back to that time, because you were an officer, jump into paralegal, you're carrying an awful lot of weight for the court challenges to try to remove the security procedures and operational procedures on the facility. How was that? How was your interactions with staff? Did they see you as like a fellow soldier going into battle, or so to speak, with the courts, or were you, hey, that guy out there that they really didn't associate with, really didn't know what you were doing? How'd that go?
No, it wasn't. I can't say it was ever like that. The staff were great. I mean, they were helpful the best they could. They would give me, if they didn't know the information, they might help me lead lead me to the right direction where to go. But the departments, especially we had an SIS at the time, a special investigating supervisor, and his staff were very helpful at the time. You had a lot of correctional officers that were beneficial to me when I was trying to get nuts and bolts information. And they knew me because I had worked down there with them. I had worked a lot. I mean, I worked a control unit, and I worked at segregation units, and I worked at general population units. The same places all these things happen. I worked there. Of course, the control unit is where the murders actually happen. Uh, and that's the worst of the worst of the worst. I mean,
Yeah.
if you're going to have an issue,
Well, that's good because I know the role that you were playing at that time to defend, the changes that were coming, that were being made there. Like you said, even the structural changes that they were making, because now you're dividing a facility up even more so that you have either smaller groups or no group. Everything's individual.
right,
It's great to know that, and I know because I've known the people that were there when I was there.
right,
That work that you did was appreciated because you were defending their safety. You were defending, making sure that that day never happened again.
right,
And fortunately, although there's been some difficult times out there, or there was difficult times after, October 22nd of '83, um, it wasn't to the magnitude, and safety procedures and precautions were in place.
right.
So how did that go? So you go to court, you're working with the U.S. attorney to prove the case. How did that go?
Well, I mean, the U.S. attorney kind of works. They work kind of the same way. They had to paint the picture to the judge because it was that's who was ultimately going to make the decision. So that's the same thing I did as far as providing the cases and stuff. They had witnesses come up and testify uh, for all kinds of different things about not only specific inmates but gangs, about operations, and why we felt like we had to operate like this, or why have we locked down, uh, and we just kind of set the pattern on what's going on. Uh, so that the judge understood it. Our fortunate enough, our judge heard cases about the prison all the time. He probably knew more about the prison than especially new people, new staff. He knew a lot about the prison and how it operates. He even knew the inmates, a lot of them, because they've been in front of him numerous times. Usually suing us for something, but he was very familiar with them. And even the Court of Appeals, as it went up the line to to the district court, of course, the Court of Appeals, uh, it's not like they weren't familiar with the prison. We'd been around a while. I don't know if you would have won that case had you been in a new district and you were at a new prison, like the ADX, for instance, when they first went out there. We were fortunate enough; the Seventh Circuit was knew all about the Marion prison.
What I was reading about was that, we probably should have started with this, but Marion was built to so they could close Alcatraz.
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, this court who you talked to on that, it was closed. Alcatraz was closed about the same time, and a lot of the inmates did come to Marion, but it was not necessarily according who you talked to. They were building Marion either way. Marion was a new, modern, high security facility, and even if they had kept Alcatraz open at the time, I think Marion would have been built anyway.
So it opened in '63, and then
Yes.
when I read, and like I said, I'm not trying to play attorney here. I'm just going off what I read. In 1979, the Bureau of Prisons implemented a custody classification of prisons, and they designated it as a six, the highest level. So it's above penitentiary level. It's above general population level.
Right.
And then '80 hits, and from '80 to that October date, all of that stuff happens.
Right.
And then off you guys go and you defend it. And I was interested because when I was reading a lot of as much as I could about it, the model that was designed from '83 going up to that point has been similar model implemented multiple states, multiple jurisdictions, and it's been challenged many, many, many times, on the Eighth Amendment saying cruel and unusual punishment, whether it's the structures of the facility, the length of time they spend, in segregation, or just the solitary, no cellmates, no this, no
Right.
that. A couple of the things I read, I don't agree with because they were saying like the inmates didn't have televisions. Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
Uh,
Right.
they had a TV, they had a radio, they had things to occupy their time. Then they even got their education. Like they said, there was no education stuff. At least when I was there was
Right.
education because it was done on TV.
Right.
And they had teachers who came down and visited and picked up the papers and their homework and did that kind of thing with them.
Well, staff were on the range all the time. I mean, so they. I mean, uh, and versus Marion versus let's say the ADX. My personal opinion. I think the way Marion worked so well. We had the open bars, so I mean, inmates could talk to each other. I mean, it's not like they couldn't talk to each other back and forth. That's not necessarily a great security thing, but it was
Yeah.
as far as them having the opportunity to communicate, it was there.
Yeah, and that was a thing too that kind of kept you honest as a staff member because it was open bars.
Right.
And when you made your rounds, which you did make them, you had to
Oh,
go from cell one to the last cell and you had to come back.
right.
And once in my opinion, this is just me. Once you establish a level of respect with those guys, because you had to, because any
Right.
day they can disrupt your whole flow. Um, I think the open bar thing helped out because
Right.
it definitely made everybody somewhat even, so to speak,
Right.
if that makes sense. But all right, so then you guys go to the court. 1985 rolls around. Courts decide in favor. How did that when it comes back to the facility and says, okay, we won the court case, things aren't changing? How did that go over?
Well, I think at that point that this gave us it told us that we could go. What we were doing wasn't wrong, but we never quit thinking of ways we could do it better with more structure. Um, and I know just, of course, I left in, I think 1990 is when I left, first left the institution. And it ran pretty close to the way it did in 83. But when I came back years later, which was, I think I came back in 95, 96. I tell you the truth, I don't know the exact date.
Oh, as the
But
AW.
yeah, it had changed a little bit. We had implemented where, of course, we made structural changes, and that's why we could do it. We made these structural changes where we could get them outside rec. Uh, there was these like walkways. It was secured walkways that they could walk out to these recreation areas, and they were wrecking them in small groups. So they were starting to give a little flexibility to that. And I think at that point they were also talking about letting them, if they did well for a certain period of time, kind of graduate to where they could go to a more open facility. Because that was going on even when I came back as warden. And some did, some didn't. Because some of them couldn't make it a week without something happening. And you say, well, how did they do that? Well, they saw people during recreation, or they throwing stuff on staff. That was pretty common. Urine, feces, that kind of stuff. And if that happened, they kind of just start all over again. Some of them I
Yeah.
didn't. I think they wanted to do it. Some of them, I think they felt very safe.
Did it kind of give the staff a badge of honor to know that although that horrible incident took place, there's a little bit of validation or vindication at the fact that now they're leading the charge in a super max model of a prison?
Oh yeah, I think that. Yes, I think that, they were very proud of that. But I also think they felt some vindication from some of the comments that were made by some groups, different groups that that we were basically mistreating them and all that kind of stuff. I think they also felt like people cared about them, enough to say, I get it. This is unsafe. This is not a safe environment for. We've got to allow them to put together some safeguards. I think that helped a lot of people. Probably helped them stay instead of maybe if we'd lost that case, they might have all left.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that. You have this prison, this this model of corrections, I guess the maximum of corrections operations in this tiny little town in southern Illinois,
Right.
somewhat near the Kentucky border, and you just have, good down to earth people working there, and all of a sudden this happens. And yeah, I know when I was there was an awful lot of pride in the fact that the people who, after the incident, that stayed around, and they brought in more people to support. There's
Yes.
a time frame there where they brought in people to support, but then when they realize that, hey, what they're doing is keeping other prisons safer, because those inmates in the other facilities that could not get along with other inmates or could not get along with staff and were going to do horrible things, not just little things, horrible things, had to have a place to go. There had to be some place to put them. At the
Right.
same time, like you said, as the agency recognized, but there has to be some kind of a release. There has to be some kind of a pressure release. They have to know that, hey, if I follow certain rules, I have a chance to going back to a mainline facility. And if they did it, they did it. But like you said, some of them, they realized that was probably the best place for them to be.
Right. Right.
And I can,
And they like the single cell status, just to have your own cell. And I think they felt threatened by other inmates a lot of times, and less threatened in that kind of environment. You talk about staff in general. I think the, all those staff that came in to help us during the initial stages, a lot of those staff came to work at the institution later. So they appreciated the operation, and they appreciated the fact that that we appreciated them from being here before. So they a couple years later, they might transfer in as a lieutenant.
it was one of those places, because I remember when I was offered to, I wasn't offered, I was suggested to go to Marion. I was involved in this one particular stuff. Less lethals were coming alive in corrections. They were looking at expanding its use beyond CN and CS. They were looking at impacts and stuff like that. And it was suggested, hey, if you want to be validated, if you want to be someone that people will listen to, you've got to go to a facility. The best facility you can go to for validation is Marion. So I ended up there. However, when you get to Marion, in order to have the respect of the staff, you have to earn their respect. You don't just walk in, they go, "Oh, you're my shift supervisor. Here's all the
Right.
loyalty you want." You've
Right.
got to earn that. And I like to think that I did what I did. I earned it. I earned their respect. It was a big learning experience for me. I'll tell you, I would never have been the same in corrections had I not had those 7 years there.
Right.
So
Yeah. I'm the same way. I think it did a lot for my career, made me appreciate a lot of things. Uh, just this quality of staff, the importance of having a staff member, at least whether they liked you or not, at least respect you enough that they did what you asked them to do, because they knew that you wouldn't put them in danger, and you wouldn't ask them to do something that was going to get them in trouble or get them hurt. Not
that's
on
what I
purpose.
learned. I did a podcast with Rick Harns. I'm not sure if you ever worked with Rick Harns or not, but and he wanted to talk about use of force. And when there was a part of the, oh, there was a part of our conversation that didn't make it on the podcast, but we were talking about, the intricate parts of force. And it's not just something you do. It's a very personal thing. It can cause injury to other people, include, the inmate and yourself and others. There's a lot of things to it. And when I say that Marion was important to me in the future years, was because I learned an awful lot about patience in corrections. I learned that sometimes you just got to tuck your tail and get through the moment and get a plan developed on how you're going to move forward with it. I
Right.
don't know that I would have gotten that in in such a such a caliber of time, or that time frame that was there, had I not been there. And those are the things that later on, I believe, just me, is what made me better at managing situations like this and protecting staff and protecting inmates.
Right. No, I agree. I think that I feel the same way. I know it's the place where I figured out a way to leave it when I left work. Unless work called me, uh, I didn't think about it that much. I was able to not worry myself to death and worry about the next day so much. I spent more time making sure that my family was taken care of, and I had a good took care of my kids and all that kind of thing. That's hard to do. You can, if you don't though, there's no way I could have spent 50 years in this business.
Do you, and this is why I really, one of your characteristics that I really appreciate about you is you're humble. I mean, you took the time when I was there as a shift supervisor to, to educate me and to give me, like the look behind the curtain and see what the wizard was really up to. We had conversation, and what I liked about it, you did it with humor. You have a very nice, sarcastic way of putting things. But it creates a level of, hey, this person's talking to me and sharing things with me. I need to kind of listen up to this because of your humility and how humble you are. Do you ever sit back and realize the significance that you had on all corrections in the country based upon that time of you being a paralegal and going through that court and establishing a model of prison management that had not been seen before?
No,
That's too
no.
bad.
I mean, my thing is, I just when I think about my corrections career, I just hope I made a little bit of a nugget on
Well,
life and in prisons. Because you talking about those, a lot of those conversations I had with, like for you and things like that, and with other staff. And I mean, I always made a point to talk to staff a lot. I was learning too every time because the bosses aren't always right. The bosses think they are, but a lot of
yeah,
times we get such good information from the line staff, and that we could step back and say, "Wow, maybe we should do it that way." That's this just
yeah,
because you did it, a certain way before, or somebody maybe even taught you to do it that way.
yeah.
Maybe that's not the right way always to do it.
Yeah, because things change, and that's kind of going what you were talking about is, in that time frame, 83, 85 courts, but then you come back later on as AW, there's been modifications to it because they realize there's a better way of
Right,
doing it. Come back as warden, modified some more. There's a better
right,
way of doing it. And I'm sure that since 2003, there's been other modifications and things to
right,
other agencies who've implemented the same type of stuff. And that's why what I love about corrections, and I don't think it gets enough, I don't think it gets enough credit. They always say people in corrections don't like change.
right.
But yet, if you look throughout your entire career, just about every year you changed.
Right.
You changed something.
Well, that's why they call it corrections, because we're always have to correct things or change things. I think that's just part of it. Um, and that's good. I mean, society changes. We had to change with it. Not always. Now, I'm not saying I always agree with all those changes, but sometimes, I look back and later on and say, that really wasn't a bad change. That really
No.
wasn't that big a deal.
And that's why it's so nice and refreshing, although sometimes it can be frustrating to have those other voices in the room that don't think like you,
Right.
because they're looking at it from a different perspective. And if you let that play run out, a lot of times you might find you get further down the field than if you
Right.
just kept doing the same old, run it up the middle type thing.
Right.
But no, I really respect the fact that you were willing to have a conversation with me, because you're definitely a leader who made a very large impact on my life. You made a big impact on the way I see and view things. You've always been a person. Here we are. I worked for you in 2003 to 2005 or six, and here we are 20 years later,
Right.
and you still let me bend your ear. You never have once said anything's a bad idea. You might just say, "Hey, you might want to rethink
Right.
that," But then you give me something else to look at. But then if I just know you've always been there, and I know that if you changed my life, there have been 50 years that you've been doing things. You have made an impact on a lot of people's lives. So I wanted to honor you and say thank you for that. And I'm glad we had a chance to talk about this.
Well, I appreciate it. I've enjoyed it. As I always enjoy talking to you.
So what's going on with you? Is there anything happening? I mean, you're living on the farm, you're doing that thing, you got
Just getting
cats.
old. Just getting old.
Yeah.
Going to doctors and we won't get into the details on that, but it's just part of it. I'm working a little bit on occasion, as a consultant for contract, but not a lot. Um, I don't know if I even want to do a whole lot. Uh, I like doing stuff like this, though.
Yeah. Well, you've had a successful career. The thing is, and that's why I wanted to focus on it. You made a mark in corrections, period. And I want that to be remembered. And then I know that hopefully this podcast is seen by many people and they realize that's the guy that did that. So thank you for it. Thank you for coming on this Corrections Unfiltered. Hopefully, I get the guys on one and you can join us because they're pretty good guys, and they like to cut up a little bit too.
All
And
right.
you'll be right there with them. So if you wouldn't mind sometime, maybe get on here with all of us and we
Okay.
do this together.
Let me
Sound
know.
good?